as we sit here. And in terms of bringing this presence, there are all sorts of techniques, there are all sorts of methods that you could use. For now, there's no need to commit to this or that per se. But of course, if you already have an established way of doing that, please do that now. If you don't, then some moments of paying attention to breath, some moments of deepening your breath, some moments of taking deliberate breath, breathing in, breathing out, some moments of bringing a tighter attention to specific spots. Sometimes they say at the place where your breath enters your body and where it exits. Sometimes they say pay attention to your abdomen as it rises and falls alongside your breathing pattern. Sometimes just simply permeating your whole body with awareness. Any and all of these is just fine. Use them as a way of bringing skillful presence and attention right here, right now. Sometimes we need to give our mind, our attention, a good reason to be here rather than to be somewhere else. And if that's the case, then in those moments, perhaps you could focus on where within this body is there a sensation that is pleasant and pleasing, at ease, and bring your mind to that specific spot. Let your mind enjoy that sensation. Perhaps it's the sensation of breathing itself, that you're starting to notice that every breath, every inhalation and exhalation brings so much ease and comfort to the body, to your whole being. And let the mind have that as a reason to be interested, to be present here rather than somewhere else. So do not be afraid to notice these pleasing sensations that could arise alongside paying attention to your breath, or pleasant sensations in your body. Or if you're familiar with the practice of metta and find that very inspiring and comforting, the radiating of loving kindness in all directions, you could also do that to give your mind a reason to be here rather than somewhere else. perhaps you are familiar with those instructions that say you breathe in, feel and imagine breathing in all that which is good, all that which is calming, all that which is inspiring from the 10 directions. Then you breathe in that way. And give your mind a reason to be here rather than somewhere else. So, again, good morning and hello to everyone. All those who have gathered here at the Dharma Center in Johnson City, as well as those who are able to join us through Zoom. Our Zoom support, John has asked me to mention that the truth of impermanence and the unreliable nature of all experiences may manifest stronger today on Zoom. So you guys on Zoom have the added advantage of suddenly hearing me and suddenly not hearing me. Or suddenly seeing me or suddenly not seeing me. So just be aware, and then if you really know what to do with that, when that happens, that's the opportunity to look at your mind and see what it is complaining about. And what's the nature of such complaints. Yeah? So anyway, this exercise in first cultivating skillful attention. So then I talk briefly about what you can do with the body and what you can do with the mind, and then what you can do with body and mind to cultivate or to develop skillful attention. Then, if you want to take this beyond the context of developing skillful attention, and this is where your practice now enters the path of Buddha Dharma, meaning the Dharma that will make you awake. Buddha Dharma. Buddha Dharma sounds like the Dharma of the Buddha, like he has a copyright on it, like he owns it, or like he made it up, right? Actually, the deeper meaning of Buddha Dharma is the Dharma, the teachings, the understandings, and finally the teachings and the understandings regarding how things are, which is the definition for truth in Buddhist teachings, how things are rather than how things appear to be. So this Dharma, if we cultivate, if we follow, if we work on it, will wake us up, will make us Buddha. So Buddha Dharma. So if we want to go beyond developing skillful attention, then this skillful attention needs to be guided in particular directions. But for many people, developing the skillful attention itself is a goal unto itself. I'm not trivializing those goals. I'm just pointing out that having skillful attention is not yet going all the way to what the Buddha really was most interested in. And this, the need to say this, I think reflects like the way in which Buddhist teachings, Buddhist practice have been made available and relevant to people as these teachings, these traditions come to the West. Where Buddhist teachers are quite aware and alert to the fact that not everyone is interested in the full, extent of what the Buddha has to say. And then others from the receiving side have discovered that, well, certain Buddhist techniques, certain Buddhist practices can contribute to general well-being, can contribute to supporting the best of what I already believe in. You know? But now, I don't know, 30 years ago, we can sort of say, oh, we believe in, as Americans. Now, who knows what that means, right? But mainly, I even though with so much change and everything and people disagreeing, I think there is a certain kind of characteristics to what we sort of believe in, which is a materially based understanding of the world, a strong secular humanist element to this materially based understanding. So none of this is negative. I'm not critiquing, just describing, a secular humanist centered based approach to a materially based understanding of what is real. So we trust a lot, what the body seems to be saying or doing. And we are content, to leave it at that. And what is the good life? The good life is being able to provide for yourself, for your family. The good life is to be able to see, family unfolding nicely, all of that. So then there are Buddhist practices, even Buddhist ideas that can help promote that good in the world. But that itself is not yet Buddha Dharma. And my job as a Buddhist teacher is not only to present the first part, but also to present the second part. What you take from part 1 and part 2 is entirely up to you. So the second part, after developing, or alongside it, let's say, it's not like, oh, I have finished developing skillful attention. Now, what should I be attentive to? Alongside developing this skillful attention, the Buddha has a very clear prescription, a very clearly articulated path to where should this skillful attention go? What should you be attentive to? So I would say, and there are many ways of saying what I'm going to say next and what we're going to share together, explore together for the next few hours. The way I'm going to put it is, there is a set of there are two sets. The first set, and so now I'm not going to put a label, let's just say set 1, set 2. The first set is directing this skillful attention to noticing certain qualities that currently exist in all the experiences that we have. From very inspiring experiences to very disturbing experiences to very mundane, mostly unnoticed experiences. And here experiences refer basically to when sight, sound, smell, taste, touch occurs, and the thoughts and the feelings that accompany these experiences. So experience here in other words, refer to what we may think of as reality. But then if you lean into that and say, oh, reality, well, what are we talking about? Well, actually, all we're able to account for when we think about reality is these thoughts and feelings that arises in relation to when the eye sees something, when the nose smells something, when the tongue tastes something. So sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, giving rise to emotive and cognitive experiences. So with regards to all these experiences, the Buddha says, pay attention to how, at least now, there is a quality that is, so maybe you'll say, oh, this sounds like bad news. We always start with bad news, this is, and you're like, well, it's so negative. Yeah, maybe it's negative. But you should also consider that, well, maybe it's because that which is good don't need our attention. And that which is, quote unquote, bad is standing in between us and what is good. Right? So then, recognizing what is, not good or bad news can more quickly help us be done with it. So the first quality to experiences, and that quality has to do with the way that experiences turn up for us. The first quality is the quality of unsatisfactoriness. More commonly translated as what? Suffering. Right? Suffering. Unsatisfactoriness. That all our experiences carry that flavor, unsatisfactoriness. Then you might say, well, what about this? What about that? Right? I'm pretty sure whatever it is that you can come up with, if you really, kind of pay attention, you're like, yeah, it is. It has that quality to it. It's unsatisfactory. You say, well, what about, infinite love, agape, What about that? Well, the ideal may not be unsatisfactory, but the way it arises for us currently right now is unsatisfactory. Not enough. Can't turn up whenever you want it. Can't stay whenever you tell it to not go away. Right? So even very noble ideas, or in the context of Buddhist teachings, compassion, right? Insofar as how you and I are able or not able to conjure that up, it carries this quality of unsatisfactoriness. So that's the first quality. Skillful attention should be directed at paying notice to the unsatisfactory nature of all experiences. In recommending to us, in teaching us to do this, the Buddha is not telling us that therefore when you see this unsatisfactoriness, right, throw a tantrum. Why so not fair? Whatever form of that we do, depends on who else is around, I guess. But again, now these days it's fashionable for everyone to throw tantrums in front of the whole world. Because if it is not seen, it's not real. Kind of like the forest, the tree that falls in the forest, you know? Now the answer is like, you know, if a tree falls in the forest and it doesn't turn up on social media, did it happen or not? But anyhow, right? Unsatisfactory. Second quality, and there is without being too dogmatic about this, there is a certain, at least for now, there is a certain logic to the sequence of these. There are three characteristics. And the first one is unsatisfactory. The second quality is uncertain. Uncertain. And that, normally is translated as what?
Suffering.
Well, the first one is suffering. The second one? Uncertain.
Indifference.
Impermanence.
Yeah.
In Buddhist talk. in literature, Buddhist literature. Impermanence, right? Impermanence, of course, now we're talking about translation. Now we're talking about English. So in Sanskrit it's anitya, Pali is anicca. Impermanence, as in the English translation for anicca, anitya, it's a little abstract, kind of intellectual, impermanence. The felt sense of impermanence is really what we are to work with, not just as a concept. And so I think a better translation is uncertainty. It's just not certain. And in the face of uncertainty, if you don't recognize the uncertain nature, the uncertain quality of these experiences, and then you have hopes and fears, right? Then very quickly you see the unreliable nature of this uncertainty. So second, to pay attention, to direct skillful attention to, is the uncertain nature of experiences. That it can change. What appears to be unlikable may turn likable. What appears to be likable may turn unlikable. What appears to be, what initially might appear to be, I don't have particular reactions to it, might very quickly lead to very strong response to. So uncertainty is the second quality that skillful attention should go to again and again and again and again, both in terms of breadth and depth. So we develop skillful attention through those exercises that we did, and I just gave very kind of throughout here various techniques that various Buddhist teachers and traditions will teach, but really all of that is to develop skillful attention. Then skillful attention needs to go somewhere. First is the unsatisfactory nature of experiences. Second, the uncertain nature of experience. Third, the not you nature of experiences. What does that mean? The not you nature, the not me nature of experiences, which is, this is pointing out to how we habitually take on more than we need to when experiences turn up, which is all the time, of course. And so all the time, yeah, when we experience something, or when an experience takes place, we latch on, even if it is for one moment, but we latch on and kind of add it on to the paper mache you, yeah, your masterwork of this lifetime. You know, you slap it onto it and say, ah ha ha. You know? But the Buddha is saying that habit, you should pay attention to that habit of thinking everything as I, of owning too much, owning things, owning experiences that need no owner. Now be careful, right? Here it's not the problems of, we can talk about that later perhaps if it comes up again, but just to have a footnote there, be careful of what people call spiritual bypassing. Yeah. So don't take these practices as a way to kind of, that's not me. Again, the Buddha applied this to everything, not just the things that, we don't like, not just the emotions that we clearly recognize to be harmful, even those feelings, those emotions, those aspirations that are said to be helpful. The Buddha also says, actually, can you see that it is not you? That you don't need to own it. Much less, copyright it. Not much less patent it, So, not me, not mine. These experiences that turn up. So these three qualities, they are articulated as three qualities, but we should not be too rigid about it. Oh, this is this, this is this, this is this. It's just the starting point for you to kind of direct skillful attention towards experiences, and as a starting point, having these three words, having these three concepts is useful. But don't be too rigid about, where's the dividing line? This and that. Doesn't this come first? Doesn't that come first? I gave this sequence because from my own experience, I feel that if you start with paying attention with the unsatisfactoriness, then you look at the uncertain, because in the face of seeing unsatisfactoriness, we might get depressed slightly or greatly, because we because of our habits, we say, right? So then the next quality helps, but it's uncertain. In other words, it's not going to remain like this. Don't lose your wits over it. It's uncertain. Don't. As heavy as this experience of unsatisfactoriness, which might turn into suffering, the suffering of starvation, the suffering of being hunted, being chased down, being bombed, right? From the unsatisfactoriness of, oh, I'm tired of sitting in this way, I'm going to now go sit on a chair. To suffering on that scale, all of it don't last, changes. So uncertain. Then, not only are they uncertain, you don't need to own them. First of all, you don't need to own them. Second of all, you can't really own them. So then you can't really, you don't need to own them is because you can't really own them. Why can't you own them? Because they are uncertain. And because they are uncertain and we have certain habits in place, we think it's bad. That they are unsatisfactory. But unsatisfactoriness actually is a quality that arises because we have a mind. Right? Uncertain, whether you have a mind or not, it's uncertain. Right? Not you, whether you have a mind or not, that's just how it is. But the unsatisfactoriness part, the first one, has to do with the fact that you have a mind. Whatever you want to call it, a mind, a heart, a soul, yeah, use whatever term you want. We all sort of know what we're talking about. You have awareness. You have a mind that has capable of having experiences. And then because of that, this quality of unsatisfactoriness arises. So this takes us to the second set. Remember, there's a second set to the skillful attention. And the second set to the skillful attention is to look at qualities of this mind. Briefly, this mind and these two qualities need a lot more unpacking, which we'll do later. But it said that this mind is empty hyphen clarity. Or, in terms of two qualities, the mind is empty of essence, but yet has the power of knowing. Just for now, empty of essence, what does that mean? Just for now. If you're very curious, what does that mean? For now, just understand that as saying, again, it's not yours. You can't own it. And why? Because it doesn't need an owner. And it works a lot better if you don't own it. Yeah, in simple terms, what empty means. There are thousands of pages of what emptiness means, according to the different philosophical traditions within Buddhism. If you have a knack for those things, it's good to study them because it helps. But what it is helping is to help you to get this point. This mind is empty of essence. 1 point. Second quality. Why we call it mind? Because it has it's that which has the power to know. To know. To be aware. And this knowing, this quality of knowing, this quality of, and poetically, clarity. or clear light or luminosity. These just poetic expressions. Luminosity, clarity, clear light. This is talking about how experiences arise vividly. So suffering arises vividly because of this quality of clear light of the mind, luminosity of mind. Happiness also arises powerfully, clearly, because of this quality, because of the mind having this quality. So this is, in a nutshell, the second set that skillful attention should go towards, should be led towards examining again and again and again and again. So there are these two sets. If we want to think linearly about this, which is not a problem, it's only a problem when you think that's the only way to think about it. So if we want to think linearly about this, then you first turn to the first set. Then over time, you look at the second set. In the end, these are not two sets also. But as to how these two sets actually kind of are not two sets and come together, right? It's better that you discover that through your own experience of it. Rather than, again, a lot of words, a lot of concepts, right? I'm sure all of you are familiar with non-dual. Sometimes capitalized even. These are the graven images of Buddhism. False gods. No need to go in that direction. So skillful attention is to be developed, cultivated, by first paying attention to body and mind as we know them right now. Right? You can't argue, or there's no need to argue against the fact that there's a bunch of physical processes going on. Who can argue against that? There's a bunch of mental, emotional processes going on, and when you say I, essentially you're talking about that. So then you start there. Find ways to optimize body at ease, at rest, content. Find ways to keep mind present with the body. Give the mind, like a child, give the child a reason to stay. Rather than yelling at the child, don't run around, don't run around, don't run around. Give it a reason. And the reason can be found in very simple ways. So do that, right? Do whatever you need to bring these two to the same space. And to encourage, body to know mind and mind to know body. These are like, long lost twins or, soulmates separated at birth, whatever poetic words you want to use, bring them, these two together, let them reacquaint with each other in a space that is wide, safe, protected. And if you are able to do that, for many people, that's enough. They're like, I don't need other things. And if that's what you want from out of this, good. Enough. Of course, the Buddha says, yeah, but then the root problems are not solved, Then this good thing will only be good if you're able to keep it all together all the time. Then what happens when body inevitably falls apart? Right? When mind inevitably falls apart. With modern medical technology, it has, I think, mostly has done a good job in keeping the body intact together. Not so good yet at keeping mind intact and together, and much less keeping the two together. Maybe one day we'll get there, but not right now. Right now we are farming it out to AI. So, skillful attention, then skillful attention alongside these two sets of turning skillful attention towards. And then, from there, liberation becomes possible. Buddhahood, in Buddhist specific language, Buddhahood becomes possible. So, questions, comments, observations?
Yes? Well, I don't know if it'll make sense out of context, but the place I got stuck was the suffering, like you mentioned a camp. You've gone from you're sitting and you're comfortable in your Dharma center, and then life changes and life changes and life changes, and you get to the camp and things are miserable, but you don't own that. And I guess, what does that look like when you're miserable? Everything about you, your physical, is uncomfortable, and you don't know where you are. And I think you would have a tendency to own that, and I guess to bring your mind to that point where, like where they say sometimes members in concentration camps could still be happy. And I guess that's where you want to go, but I guess it's something to think about also, what do you do with those situations that really push you? How do you not own that?
Don't go there. Don't go there.
If you have that choice, yeah.
Most of us have that choice in this room.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking of refugees and those situations.
Right. But nothing we can do in this moment about that situation. First, ourselves, be disciplined about don't go there. Right? Then, of course, do what is possible, right? To undo things that would lead people there or would drag people there, right? So, skillful political engagement, all of that, right? Me as a Buddhist teacher, I have no ability to tell you how to do those things. Here, come back to, so sometimes I say to people, don't apply Buddhist teachings beyond your capacity, which is a tendency we do. We say, whoa, what about Gaza? You say that suffering is not real there? How can you say that? Okay, do we want to argue or do we want to change our ourselves right now, you know? Do that, but without taking this to try to answer those questions there. I think those bigger scenario questions are really complicated and really hard, you know? And don't try to get easy answers from Buddhism.
But could it help to kind of, you know, when you're talking about investigation and stuff like that, could it help to try to start, you know, trying on some of these ideas and see what that does in that moment for your suffering, your situation, something like that. You know, maybe you won't get it completely, but like with loving kindness, where you start, in meditation to have, well, I love that person that I really don't like. You know, I mean, that you try it out and eventually your mind works with that possibility.
Sure, I'm not going to argue with you on that.
Okay.
I can always try.
Yeah. But that's where I like, too, the flexibility in this whole, that there's no rigidness to it. Because
you can always try,
in each situation where you go with that stuff.
I have simultaneously, I think I have a more modest belief in how much these teachings can solve world problems and how much these teachings can transform you. In the Buddha's own life, whether you like it or not, it's there. They didn't hide it. They tell you what happened. In the Buddha's own life, he wasn't able to protect his people from being invaded by a neighboring kingdom. Even though the leader of the neighboring kingdom respects him as a spiritual teacher and led forces 3 times to invade the Buddha's native kingdom. And the Buddha intervened 3 times. And after that, the Buddha says, there's nothing I can do. So, it's sobering. So I say, don't, there's no easy answers, right, to these really big problems. But doesn't mean we don't try, We do. We keep trying. But sometimes, right, in the abstract of, I want to solve those problems, we're not taking care of things that we can take care of and we should take care of. So when I was a college professor at Warren Wilson College over in Swananoa on the other side of Asheville, I don't know if you all know Warren Wilson College. At least at one point it has a reputation of being very activist-minded and students with a lot of heart and all of that, and maybe some other things also. I remember when my first semester there, I had students that came to me one day and said, I may not be in class on Monday. I said, okay. And then they say, just want to let you know, may not be able to come to class on Monday. I said, why? Because there was a certain uncertainty the way they said it. I said, why? They're like, this weekend going to the School of the Americas to protest. Might get arrested and not come to class. The School of the Americas, you know about that? This is where our country trained people to undermine governments that we don't like in Latin America. There's a karma to that. Anyway, so Warren Wilson College. I was threatening to make bumper stickers, not for bumpers, but for communal kitchens. in the dorms. Yes. Bumper stickers, not for car bumpers, but for communal kitchens in the residence halls. And those stickers will say, if you can't do your dishes, you can't save the world. Gosh. Everybody just putting, whatever plate, bowl, cup that they've used there and let it pile up and pile up and pile up, and then the RA and the RD are like, I gotta do your dishes, we're gonna throw them away, la la la, and everything, and they're too busy saving the world. I'm still trying to get consistent with brushing my teeth. That's the truth. Here's my confession. Saving the world? I don't know. If you're truly saving the world, I salute you. But don't let the notion of saving the world distract you from the teeth that needs to be brushed, the dishes that needs to be cleaned, so that other people living with you don't have to deal with your mess.
Well, the Israelis killed another 100 Gazans just yesterday, and they have another attack planned for next week. And the World Food Kitchen went out of business again in the last 24 hours. And I mean, I understand where you're coming from, and I don't exactly disagree with you, but I wish we could do something.
Yeah.
And it's really tough. I mean, it's a tough situation.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
totally. I don't know the answer either.
Yeah. I don't know the answer to those big questions. But
it's just tough.
Right now, right?
Yeah.
Self-maintenance.
It's just tough.
Self-care.
Yeah.
And whether we know self-care or not directly impacts people around us.
Yeah.
And when it negatively impacts people around us, now they will negatively impact people around them, and so on and so forth. I said immediate action that you can take right now, for the most part, is limited to about a 50-mile radius. If you really want to go do it, right, a 50-mile radius.
That's about it. I understand.
Yeah. Then, of course, there are things that can be done, like go vote. Oh my goodness. It's pointless to vote. Okay. Then start a revolution. I'm not for violence, but then if you don't want to vote, start a revolution. Like, French Revolution came with guillotines. I'm against violence. Anyway, that's not the topic today.
No.
Great Tree Zen Women's Temple is sponsoring a new series called Mindful Politics, starting next weekend, so look into it. You can participate on Zoom too. They are brave souls. I neither have the guts nor the skill to teach that topic. So, yes, other questions, comments? Yes.
A few Zoom questions.
Oh, good. Zoom questions.
Let's see. I think Judy may have had your hand up first if you want to go ahead and speak. Oh, wait. I have to unmute you one moment. Where did you go? You disappeared.
Next.
There you are. Alright. Serena Jane. There we go.
Hi, Dr. Lai.
Hello.
So you talked about skillful attention, and then you talked about understanding of impermanence, and then, like if this was a linear path, I guess, right? You talked about diminishing of the self, no self, diminishing of ego, to eventually attaining Buddhahood. So we have words to describe the path. What are the words to describe Buddhahood? I'm just
The absence of confusion, the absence of endlessly chasing unreliable conditions to hope that they become reliable, endless running around to add to this is me, this is mine. In the early sources, the Buddha, for the most part, did not care to talk about Buddhahood as this or that. Not because there's no such thing, but because, again, it quickly becomes a graven image. It becomes a false god, an idol. So we begin with, and he began with, what you are currently experiencing. The unsatisfactoriness. Do you want to continue carrying that around? No? Unburden. Put it down. And so, the basic profile of the historical Buddha, I would, if we want to use modern terms to describe him, you could say that he was an empiricist. Yeah. Not interested in abstract thinking. He was an empiricist. Even in the way he guided people, he didn't have a system. Buddhists have to figure out a system later. And they got very good, with systems. Why? Because, Hindus come poking holes. You say this, but then you also say that. How does it all hold together? Oh, let's meet. Let's talk about how we hold it all together. Because those more sophisticated people are asking questions. But the Buddha says, I'm only interested in healing suffering. To be fair, if they didn't build up systems, we may not have any of those teachings remaining to this day. So I'm grateful for the system builders. But we don't need... but then, we should not confuse, the medicine from, the pharmacy. Of course, if you don't have pharmacies, right, or pharmaceutical companies, another difficult topic, right? If the research doesn't go on, the medicine doesn't come, yeah, okay. But then all of that needs to be done in service of medicine healing people. So anyway, yeah, let me, use this as an opportunity to clarify further based on your question. It is not also really about diminishing ego. The teachings on not you, not self, right? It's not about diminishing ego. I know, you're like, wait, what? Why do I say that?
It's balance.
Balance, yes. Uh-huh.
We need our ego to do the work, don't we?
Yeah, you need the ego to do work. And so all these are, good responses, but I'm trying to tease out certain things about language.
Because
So what was the Buddha's primary language? What kind of language? Not like, Sanskrit, Pali, but what model, what framework did the Buddha give?
the absence of a solid self.
No, what
We're causing our own suffering.
what kind of language, like
Like a metaphor.
metaphor? What kind of metaphors?
Agricultural.
Agricultural, yeah. In some cases, in this case, healing, suffering. So not philosophical. There are philosophical consequence implications. Not even psychological. There are psychological implications, consequence. So Buddhist psychology developed over time. Buddhist philosophy developed over time. Buddhist religion developed over time. Buddhist political, not so much. It's just the way this tradition developed. Because out of the Indian context, first and foremost, the Buddha was part of a larger movement called the Shramanas. These are the strivers. And the strivers, whether you like it or not, I can't change history, I can't improve this for you. They were people who said to society, I reject you. Everything that you represent, everything that you're building, I reject. The act of celibacy is the most radical act in rejecting mainstream society. The very physical basis of you reproducing this system, I reject. So they are like the ultimate radicals, which the Buddha was part of this larger movement. Of course, they all have very different ideas of how to solve what the existential problem is. And again, each of them articulated differently what the existential problem was. Yeah. So anyway, it came out of that tradition. So, like whether you like it or not, there are certain strengths and there are certain weaknesses. The weaknesses, I think, for the most part, as a result of that, there was not much political theory and practice that came out of the Buddhist context. A lot of psychology, a lot of philosophy, for sure. In the same way that you can look at, say, Christianity and Islam and you say, hey, where is your psychology and your philosophy? Kind of weak compared to Buddhists. True, but very strong when it comes to politics, actually. Because these were traditions that said, God made this world for a good purpose. So now you need to maintain this world. Right? And so they need to invest a lot of energy in figuring out the best politics, the best economics, the best set of laws, right? The Buddhist tradition says, no, we're stepping away from this. Now, of course, as Buddhism unfolded, they need to come back and talk to society, right? And so, to that degree, things develop. Anyway, language, right? So in this language of it's not you, right? It's not yet going to like ego is bad, so you should reduce your ego. Here it is simply saying, it's not part of you. And then, of course, even in the Buddha's time, people say, okay, so what is you? Right? Buddha says, it's not like he's trying to avoid or evade this question. But it really shows like his approach was very different, because almost all the other groups were very interested in answering this question. So who is the real you? So these are traditions in India that talk about the divine self, Atman. Buddha took a very different stand on that whole issue. He said, question the very premise of wanting to know who am I. Question that very premise. He says that very premise, that very question that first before trying to answer that question. And the way he does it is he says, so that question comes from this idea. It's sort of, I think it's comparable to like, this, right? I'm sure you've heard of this, this kind of question that you cannot answer. Which is like, have you stopped beating your wife? Either yes or no, you're in trouble. Yeah, so it's like, wait, what do you mean? So then, self and ego, right, is more the language of that, Who are you? Here the Buddha says this, can you see that that's not you? And that's not you. And that's not you. Why isn't that you? Because if it is you, right, there are some necessary qualities related to something being you. At the very least is, you have control over it. Do you? So right now, what do you have control over? Absolutely, at all times, without question.
Oh, the cheetah.
Really?
You should.
No, I'm asking what? Not what you should. What? Right now, what do you have absolute control over? Nothing. So it's not you. Then of course you say, but surely there is you. Yes, I think we could quietly say, there is something you. But the Buddha says, don't spend too much time on that, because within the range of our experience right now, there is nothing that we can point to say, that's me. If you needs the quality of, if it is you, you need to have control over. Right?
So I don't come here on a regular or even almost irregular basis, but and I don't mean to make this
No.
a challenge.
Yeah.
So in my world, where I've been studying Christian mysticism, first of all, there's an understanding that the Buddhists and Christians can hold each other the same, two things in the same person,
Sure.
which is great.
Yeah.
I get that. But, and this is not really a but, this is,
However,
I'm wondering how
yes. However,
this thought is around the notion that our egos are really kind of obstacles to living our true selves. And our true selves
yes.
are our unity with a divine
Sure.
indwelling.
Sure.
How does that compare to what you're teaching
Uh,
our egos here?
Different language.
different language
Yes.
thing.
All I'm calling attention to is the basic language that the Buddha used, right? So to answer maybe your bigger question, the bigger question I think is a question of what do I take? How do I take? You know, what I'm hearing. You know, what do I make of what I'm hearing here? Right? Or at least it should be that. Otherwise, you know, it's a waste of time.
Right.
Yeah, it's ultimately how do I take, you know. So my suggestion would be start from where you are. You have a tradition, whatever that tradition may be. Don't change that. Then you take whatever is useful and inform that and let that grow. But I'm also saying we cannot assume that words and vocabulary is used in the same way by everyone. And because of the haphazard way in which Buddhism is learned and transmitted in this context, in the West, it has given rise to a lot of confusion. When Christians talk about not having ego, it's not necessarily what the Buddha is talking about when he says it's not you. It sounds like they're talking about the same thing, but it could be on a different level. Yeah, so I want to highlight within the context of how Buddha used language and what kind of metaphors he used, what kind of framing he gave to what the problem is, it has its own, right, internal logic. Yes. So I taught religious studies for 10 years in college. Not a praise to myself, you know, but just an observation I share with you. Usually when I teach this class called Introduction to World Religions, right? Or sometimes I teach like Introduction. Yeah, that's like a mad rush through the world in 14 weeks. Right? But what to say, right? Anyway, I heard at some point, students telling me in those classes, it would take half a semester for them to be asking questions like, so you think he's Hindu? No, I think he's Christian. Wait, no, I think he's Muslim. Of course, I took that as a compliment. So this is kind of my intellectual baggage. I want to keep the traditions kind of distinct because there's an internal logic to how each tradition has developed and presented itself. And I'm all for, like I think especially in this day and time, I recognize, not I'm all for, if I'm all for, I would become that. That would not be honest. I recognize how, for most people, there's no need to stay within one tradition. I get that. But that's not my choice, right? However, when I present the different traditions, and even within Buddhist family, there are very different ways of talking about things. And when I present any of them, I try my best to get people to understand, right, the internal logic of this system. Yeah. So in this system, all I'm saying is, the Buddha didn't actually talk too much about the problem of ego the way that you articulated, that ego is what stands in the way of the divine self. And that is the internal logic of that particular system. And so then, if we step back completely, right, it's like the Dalai Lama says, he says, let's start with example. So Dalai Lama as a public figure, when he was actively traveling around the world, when he was addressing tens of thousands of people, he would talk on love, compassion, nonviolence, and all of that. Then sometimes people will say publicly, question and answer, can you talk about emptiness? Because they've read, right? Buddhists talk about emptiness. And on numerous occasions he would say, no. Especially, I remember reading somewhere, it was a predominantly Christian audience. He said, no. He says, because this is not your system. And in my system, when we talk about emptiness, we have a critique of the notion of God. And if I talk about that, it will harm your understanding. And so this is not the place to talk about this. So you can see, right? There's an integrity to him not wanting to just say, oh yeah, it's all the same. He says, no, it's not all the same. It's because he says, if you say it's all the same, then you are saying like, Tylenol, right? It's the same as Claritin. Wait, no, it's not. But they are both meant, right, to make you better. So he says, we cannot say they're all the same. He says, but we can say that they want to take us to a place that we can all appreciate. That, he says, so therefore, he says, love, compassion, tolerance, nonviolence. He says, when we talk to everyone, this is what we should talk about. This is what we should help each other figure out how to do better. And then each tradition offers esoteric things that maybe might be helpful or not, but don't dwell too much on all these, he says, because people get confused, Anyway, sorry. There are some other virtual hands that I see.
So now we got Judy. Should be able to unmute yourself now. No? It says I asked you to unmute.
Okay.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My question has to do with this not you nature. Since all experiences are interactive and interdependent, when we have an experience with another person and it goes awry, it seems to me that there's a risk in saying none of this is me, when we in fact have some responsibility in an interaction that may result in someone else's unskillful behavior. And what I'm really saying is we both probably have unskillful behavior. And in saying it's not me, I think there's a risk that we don't take
So
responsibility.
don't apply that in this situation.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Don't apply not you in this situation. End of story.
I agree, but that's where psychology might
Correct.
come in, but not everybody is going to do that.
Of course. So here we are.
My comment is simply, I think there's a risk in trying to apply this not you. I mean,
Correct.
okay.
So that's why I said develop skillful attention, direct skillful attention to your experiences. None of these things can be taken out of context. Huh? That I know is Judy's point. She has been around long enough to know all of this. She wants to make sure the rest of us remember. That's why I say footnote, remember? Spiritual bypassing. Watch out for that. Yeah, so it's, it's be sensible. Not you is to be applied in a situation of when you say, "Oh, that's me." But can you see that's not you? I'm a bad person. Can you see? Who is this bad person you're talking about? Right? And as I always say, don't forget to go to therapy. I cringe when people say, oh, I don't need therapy. Or like, be your own therapist. No, don't do that. I try to be realistic about what these teachings can do for you. And I think in wanting Buddhism to be like the solution for everything, many Buddhists go too far. Just what it can do, if you actually apply it, you will see tremendous change in yourself over time. I used to ask everyone to consider, do I have 30 years to work on this? And always, someone is like, but I'm 70. Same question I have for you. Because we're not ultimately talking about how many hours, how many minutes, how many days and time. We're not talking about that. Whether you're a 17-year-old, whether you're a 77-year-old, you need to be able to say, yes, I have 30 years. Okay? You get it? Don't use logic. Your heart knows what I'm talking about. And if your answer is yes, I can put 30 years into working on this, then there's a way to proceed. There's another virtual hand, and then there's the physical hand.
Rita, can you unmute yourself now?
Yes.
Rita
Hi,
is in
hi,
Guatemala.
Dr. Lee. Yes, from
Yes.
Guatemala. Yes, yes. Well, my question is about present awareness. Like I see it like everything is always changing. Your emotions, everything that is material is like the impermanence. And like if you see that and that can really see it, that will be present awareness. And also like if you decide to ride through that with compassion and love and all this, is this really make a really difference in every day?
Yes. And so again, not something that Buddha wants to talk directly, and therefore we whisper it silent, quietly. That awareness can become more and more stable, but we don't call that the self. This is radical, no false gods. Yeah. So
I don't understand.
something. There is something that stabilizes.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you
Yes.
call it awareness, mind, heart, yeah. There's something that stabilizes over time. And that's what is being developed. You know, whether you call it self, some traditions may call it self, you know, but within this tradition, sometimes it's called Buddha nature. You know, I'm sure you've read things like that.
Yeah.
Nature of mind, you know. But if we're not careful, we will also turn those things into like facsimiles and mistaking concepts for, you know, experience. Yes, physical hand.
Well, bringing science into this a little bit,
Mhm.
science with quantum physics talks about entanglement, how everything's interconnected. It seems to me that no matter what spirituality you practice, the idea is compassion, love, working on yourself, and that will affect eventually the world. That,
Even immediately,
yeah. And then
you know, your partner goes, you know, oh, right now it's easy to be around you. Or impossible. And that changes. Yes, go on, sorry.
Well, I was thinking too, well, a couple things. One, I have a cartoon at home that I, from the newspaper that I saved years and years ago. I came across this, and it's a spaceship with aliens, and they're looking at the Earth, and one looks at the other, and they said, "What are they fighting about?" And the other said, "I think they're fighting about what religion is the most peaceful." I just love that cartoon. But the other thing is, we talk a lot about ego, but was ego a word before Freud?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, you know.
Yeah, so there's an intellectual genealogy to these ideas that we hold. Correct. So sometimes I think, you know, in certain parts of Western psychology, there is like healthy egos, you know, a healthy sense of self, which the Buddha recommended. Actually, the Buddha says, you know, so okay, now we go into details. We started with just a meditation and me giving you an idea of what the goal of meditation really is, you know. It's not just that, you know, I feel better, I feel more relaxed, I'm not so stressed anymore, you know, my pains have disappeared, you know. So the Buddha says, you know, here is how you cultivate a healthy, supportive sense of self. Now, he doesn't use sense of self. He has his own language, which I translate for you as he is talking about. Here is how you build a healthy and necessary sense of self. But even this sense of self that you're building, right, that is healthy and necessary, don't forget the footnote, right? Don't own this self like you want to own it in the neurotic way, right? Don't be rigid about, well, this is me, you know, and this is who I am, you know. The healthy, necessary sense of self that he says you need to have in order to actually do the work of looking at, yeah, the three qualities on the one side, the first set, and then the second set. Yeah. He says, in order to effectively do all of that, you need a healthy ego. What is this healthy ego? This healthy ego, if we want to use ego in a positive sense, because in Western psychology, you know, there are uses of the word ego that is good, which I would use a healthy sense of self. Sense of self. See, not different from self. Right? We all have a sense of self. So, what is our sense of self currently? Oh, you know. Currently, you write memoirs. publish memoirs, to explore your sense of self. But no, the Buddha says a healthy sense of self can and should be cultivated on the basis of observing the precepts and the vows of training. Not killing, not stealing, not committing sexual misconduct, which primarily means adultery and betrayal of trust. Buddha wasn't a prude. Buddha had very, strong things to say about sexual desire, of how that holds us, and traps us. But he wasn't a prude. And so he's not against. In this training that we're talking about here is sexual misconduct is basically understanding how powerful that desire is and the mischief that can come up from there. Don't betray trust. Don't take advantage of others. Fourth, speech. Don't deceive, to manipulate. And fifth, don't cloud the mind with intoxication. So this is one set. A bigger set is to say to avoid what we call the 10 unskillful actions, which has overlaps with these 5 precepts, 5 vows. There, what's further elaborated pertains to speech. And so like the fourth one, right, simply says, no, don't engage in deceptive speech. In the list of 10 unskillful actions, it says deceptive speech, destructive speech, divisive speech, and distracted speech. Yeah. Then related to the intoxicating of the mind, in the list of 10, is not literally intoxication, but it has to do with the kind of murkiness of mind related to a coveting mind, a kind of a harming mind, and a mind under the control of mistaken views about cause and effect, or denying cause and effect. So the Buddha says, when we cultivate this, when our sense of self can be built on these guidelines, that's a good sense of self to have. Because it's a non-harming self. A self that doesn't seek to harm yourself or harm others. He says that's a good sense of self to have. So beyond the proscription, meaning don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, there's also the prescription, prescribe, which is, he says, cultivate a generous and open heart. Develop patience, which is defined as an ability to accept that which we find to be impossible. Yeah? A lot of further information on that. Cultivating inspiration, encouraging inspiration towards the good, towards the skillful. Not just inspiration, but to be inspired, to want to engage in that which is good, that which is beneficial. And then stabilizing the mind so that it's not so finicky. Cultivating a certain evenness in your emotional ups and downs. And then finally developing understanding. All those, I said, to be the good ingredients for cultivating a healthy sense of self. And all of that is part of the let body and mind settle. Let body and mind come together in a good place. You can't, no, it's impossible to achieve body and mind in a good place by simply doing meditation techniques. When off cushion, you're lying, stealing, cheating, you know, you can never achieve a settled body and mind. And, you know, skillful attention. Now, this is not linear. You're like, wait, to observe those, right, to avoid the 10 unskillful actions requires skillful attention, correct? To develop skillful attention, you need a commitment to avoiding creating what we call negative karma. So it's not linear. It's a holistic process. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you talked about like the balance of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not supposed to live in the future, you know, we're not supposed to live in
Why
the
not?
past because that's just going to cause suffering.
Oh, really?
Yeah, thinking about the future, worrying about the
okay.
future, or worrying about the past and being able to change it.
Do you believe that?
Yeah, I mean, if you constantly think about the future, you
Okay.
can't control it,
Okay.
right? You can't control the outcome, so why worry about the future if you can't control
Okay,
it?
sure.
So it's about living in the moment, right?
Correct.
Is that the whole point of balance in the mind and clearing the mind is just living in the moment?
I don't know.
Well, I don't know either. Because it's just, you know, we're not supposed to be living in whatever, and there's only so much.
Yeah,
like,
I
one
want to
person-
I want to examine not supposed to. Who said you're not supposed to?
Well, to me, if
Okay.
we're constantly worrying about a future we cannot control, obviously we can't control it. There's nothing we can control. So if we worry about the future, we're just causing unnecessary suffering in the now.
Good. Okay.
Right? And if we worried about the past, we can't change the past, so we're
Right.
causing unnecessary suffering in the now.
Right.
So there's only so much that we can live in the now.
Right. So
Walking
what's
and
living in the now look like?
Strolling down and that's a beautiful flower, let me smell it. That's a beautiful tree, let me watch it wave in the wind.
Okay.
Like having a clear mind, I would suppose,
Sure.
and not suffering.
Yeah.
So well, I guess where's the balance there? Like if
You need to find the balance.
I'm working on it.
Yes. My hesitation in saying yes, it's about living in the moment. Well, what is the moment? You know, what is the moment, right? And there's, of course, truth to. And actually, in fact, whether you do it or not, that is the only way of living that is possible. Unless you have the TARDIS or something like that, you know, the time machine, which most of us don't have, right? So that's the only option. This moment, this place, right? So that's just a fact. There's no possibility of living in the future or living in the past. So in the present. But watch out for the tyranny of the present. because you can get so caught up in being in the present. The present, you know. Yeah, watch out for that. Also, there are, so on the more serious note, there's some research that has taken place for people. I mean, they have some kind of biological basis to how their brains, right? It's not like the brains of most of us, but there are some cases where people with a certain, how the brain chemicals and wiring is off, right? And then they practice like mindfulness meditation. Instead of helping, it becomes way worse. Because they're stuck in the terror of the present. And every moment becomes terrifying. There's research in these cases. Buddhist literature don't talk about this. Modern Buddhist literature, in fact, in the traditional texts, they talk about this. But in our efforts to kind of promote mindfulness, we ignore those. It's there. It's in the traditional text. So the living in the moment, I can only say yes if I also understand from what you're saying there that you are also understanding cause and effect. You're also understanding that there are skillful actions and unskillful actions. That your moment that you're living in is guided by an understanding of causality. All of that. So, and I know in your heart, you know all of that. But just to caricature that would be like, in the moment, it's like, well, someone got to plan dinner. Right? That would be a caricature of that, right? And it's not just a caricature. It's like sometimes that's what happens. You know, it's like, okay, you know, someone else can worry about my dinner. And then you're in the moment, then you're in the moment and dinner is not there. It's like, where's my dinner? Yeah, we do that, you know.
I think it made me think of when I was working. I'm retired now. But when I was working,
Which means you're busier now.
I'm busier.
That's what I've learned.
It's true. A gentleman that I was working with anyway, we stopped for coffee, and he bumped into another gentleman that he hadn't seen in years. And they're talking, I'm listening, you know, right there. And the other gentleman was getting angry and angrier. And he was talking about how his ex-wife did this to him, did that to him, and did this. Well, when the conversation was over, we did our coffee and we went back to our truck. I said, when did that happen? He just get divorced? Oh no, he was divorced. He got divorced 20 years ago. But he carried that with him like it was yesterday. I think it can be harmful to do that.
Yes. You know, so if we were to apply that situation with what I was talking about, cultivating skillful attention, directing skillful attention to experiences, that's where you go. Then, with that skillful attention, right, pretend you are that person. Look into what you're carrying around. Is that satisfactory or unsatisfactory? And you're like, oh, of course it's unsatisfactory. But do you really believe that it's unsatisfactory? That's the problem, you know. Most of the time we don't believe it's unsatisfactory. We intellectually get it that it's unsatisfactory. Emotionally, we're like, but I want it, it's mine. That is what we have to see through. can you see the burdensome nature of this or that? And recognizing fully the burdensome nature. So it's not even about good or bad in this sense. Okay, I have to keep limiting. Otherwise, you're like, whoa, what about that? Yeah, there's always what about that. Here, right? The burdensome nature of what we are carrying around. Look into that. So I'm building this forest hermitage. I know people call it a retreat center, but no, it's not a retreat center. It's a forest hermitage. I know, it seems like, you're just arguing with words, but words are powerful. Retreat center, to me, in my mind, is bifurcates. I'm going to live crazy, I'm going to get relief. And I'm going to get relief, now I'm going to live crazy. And I'm going to get relief. And I'm going to go live crazy again. Is that what I taught? No. That's why the Buddha said, some of you need to investigate the burdensome nature of your lives and then choose simplicity, which at the root of monastic life is simplicity. It's not about all the other ideas that people tend to have about what it is. It's simplicity. It's choosing simplicity. And only for that reason, you should choose to live at the hermitage. Even if you think, it's to train myself so that I can be a teacher that can help others. Sorry, don't go there like that. It has to be, I see the burdensome nature of what I carry around. And I see the beauty of simplicity over there. So I'm going to go live there. Now, are other people going to come for a week, 2 weeks, 1 month, a day, 2 days? Yes. If we have space, please come. But you are coming so that I, me, others who are there can infect you with how beautiful it is. So there is a secret agenda to accepting short-term. It can only be that way, Really. If I say, we are living here and we're offering retreat opportunities for people, then that's just business. Yeah, come temporarily get out of the madness so that you have enough energy to go back into the madness. It seems a small point, but it's not. It's like, and I'm not saying everybody is ready to choose that simplicity. But others should recognize that as this is a way out. Whether I can or cannot immediately take the way out is very complicated. Even myself, like, do I really want to go live there? That's the truth, right? But at a certain point, no, I will. But it has to exist as, like the light on the hill that says there is a way out. And it's through here. As to when you choose to take that way out, that is what you, and it may not be this lifetime. But the people that needs to have the light on the hill cannot pretend to be something else. Right? You can't have your cake and eat it too. Does it mean right now we all should not eat cake? No, I'm not saying that. Eat your cake, keep your cake. Somebody has like a Queen Elizabeth's wedding cake somewhere, I hear. Or was it Charles and Diana's slice of wedding cake? Yeah. Somebody had kept it somewhere. Which means they didn't eat it, I guess. Okay, we should take a break. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you know. We break until we're not breaking, so don't worry if you're out there, miss something, not miss something, doesn't matter.
What time is it, Mary?
It's about 12:15.
Yeah.
So we'll try to come back 12:30. It's 12:15 our local time. 12:30 more or less we're going to start again.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Okay, so we're going to start. We start when we start, right?
We're starting.
Ding, 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 ding.
Ding ding.
Dim the lights.
Take away the
Take it off
food.
and on, yeah.
Take away the food.
Yeah, gratitude to Marina for
Yes.
making
Yeah.
all that food, yeah, great.
All Marina.
See you this way.
Is it okay if I sit here?
Sure.
Okay.
I don't think I will.
And so, this morning's kind of content or discussion, right? So please don't forget, right? Of course, we went in many directions. So this is also part of my wanting to encourage people to not hear things, right, beyond fairly limited context. Because if you let the context be too big, right, you end up with like implications that I don't mean to communicate. You know? So the context, right, just as a reminder of what I said, you know, is in the context of when you meditate. Yeah? What is it that you are training? What is it that you're cultivating? And so one, skillful attention. And there's a lot more to learn about, you know. What is skillful about skillful attention? You know, which we weren't able to cover. Right? But the general idea of what skillful attention, I hope you got, right? And then from there, still, actually, in case this is not obvious, but I guess it's not obvious because immediately questions went in the direction of, what if over there, what if over there, what is over there? Of course, you could ask that, but still, most of what I said is about when you are sitting on the cushion and you have developed skillful attention, in that context, whatever experiences meaning, and in the context of sitting on the cushion, obviously the experience is probably not tasting, unless you have a habit of meditating and going. But still, the point about, you know, there are these two areas that things are unsatisfactory, uncertain, and not you. And then the empty and the clarity aspect, right? Mainly is to be directed at thoughts and emotions coming up when you are in formal training. You get good at that, then you will know what to do when you're having an argument with someone, or now you are a refugee. The work, the training, is on a cushion, on a chair, in a controlled environment. Now, because this is very American, actually. We are very practical people. So whenever we hear anything, we want to say, how do I take it out into the world? But this tradition is always about first, in a controlled environment, which is what formal practice is, whether solitary or alongside others, so a Dharma center is a controlled environment. It's artificial, in a way, but it's a form of controlled environment. Your own space at your house where you do formal practice is a controlled environment. But then we are such practical people, we're like, I want to go out there. But most of the things that we learn in a controlled environment first. So be patient with that. So try to remember, the context of what I said is really about seated, whether on a chair, on the floor, whether with fancy cushions and yoga pants or not. Don't forget the main work and how. Now, for the second part, I want to anchor what I'm going to say on excerpts from a text. This text is a collected set of teachings. We're not sure exactly when they were compiled, or at least I don't know myself, but probably they were compiled into the current form around 14th century. But the origins of the teachings is attributed to a teacher that lived in the 11th century. Late 11th century, 12th century, to this figure called Gampopa. Gampopa is one of the giants, you could say, of Tibetan Buddhism. And he is the effective founder of what we now today call the Kagyu tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. And then within the Kagyu, there are branches of the Kagyu, cousins. And I'm from one of these Kagyu traditions, lineages within this family. So Gampopa brought together several different streams, several different traditions that he trained in his own time, and then gave rise to what we today call the Kagyu tradition. So in one collection of his short instructions that he gave, there is one instruction, and one, I'm not going to read all, well, let's see. It's called the special intention of bodhicitta. And within this collection, I feel that this is probably the first one to read, the first one to look into. So beginning with what he calls the special intention of bodhicitta. So here intention, he's talking about the various intentions that we can have, the various motivations that we can have when we engage in spiritual practice. Then more specifically, when we engage in Buddhist practice, what are the motivations? What are the different types of motivations? And it's accepted that the motivation would determine the result. So you can even think of this in terms of, like, for example, when you get in your car and you drive, where do you think you want to go? Motivation in that sense, I want to go to here, I want to go there. Now, of course, itself will not guarantee you will actually get there. many of us before the GPS and even with GPS have ended up somewhere else, right? But for sure, if you don't have a clear idea where you want to go, you'll waste a lot of time. Or you keep going, well, maybe I want to go here. Well, maybe I want to go there, which we all have experienced too. So, what is this special motivation? So he's saying there's a range of motivations. In another text in this collection, he talks about mundane motivations. So mundane motivations are not bad, but they're just mundane. Their focus is very temporary, which is, I want things to just be easier. I don't want, things to be so challenging and difficult. That's a mundane, not bad. But of course he recommends what he considers to be the best intention, the best motivation. And so this is called the special intention of bodhicitta. So then what is bodhicitta? So here he says, according to the great vehicle system, whatever one does of the stages of keeping vows, stages of keeping vows is referring to how there are more and more refined sets of vows that you willingly take to help you train. So there are stages. The first stage might even be, out of all these vows, I'm going to take this one, and I'm going to take it for the duration of half a day. Like no judgment. Actually it says, oh good. So there's a story about like a butcher during the Buddha's lifetime. After hearing the Buddha talk about, how killing is negative. I mean, obviously it's negative to who you're killing. But often the Buddha points out, in a way, the Buddha is more interested in pointing out to that person, can you see how, forget about who you're killing, if for now, right? Not that he's literally forget, but if you're not even concerned about how it impacts others, can you see how it harms you when you engage in killing? And that's the empirical part of the Buddha's approach that I was talking about. Far from stating it in the abstract, he says, can you see how this is harming your own interests when you kill others? So the butcher, heard about this, right? But then his situation is that he's a butcher. Right? He works in the slaughterhouse, maybe not butcher, like literally slaughterhouse. So he goes to the Buddha. He says, I hear what you're saying, but this is my situation now. And the Buddha said, okay, can you for once a week? He says, how often do you work? And he said, like every day. And the Buddha said, okay, so once a week, can you make it so that you don't kill one morning in a week? And the butcher says, I can probably arrange this. And he said, good, do that. Slowly, this person is guided into completely giving up and changing his livelihood. So these are stages, right? But here the point is, whatever one does of the stages of keeping vows, of accumulating merit, and purifying the mental defilements, So this is describing basically, in a more formal way, the various aspects of Buddhist training. It involves observing the vows, taking the vows, observing the vows, the precepts. It involves accumulating merit. What that means is building up, right, bright conditions, conducive conditions, creating merit means that. And then purifying mental defilements. That means removing, clearing the defilements that clutter our hearts, our minds. But he says here, whatever one does along these lines, what is done in this case is not as important as the intention behind it. So clearly these are all good things. These are all things that you should do. But then here he says, but more important than the specifics is your motivation, your intention. So, whatever Dharma practice one does, beginning with pure intention is important. Now, one should generate the special intention, which is what's called bodhicitta. He says, you should give rise to this big intention, this big motivation. And in this instruction, he says there are three ways of doing it. In the extensive way, in a middling way, and then in a very concise way. The extensive way is to think as follows. All dreamlike and illusory-like sentient beings. This is a very important qualifier. All dreamlike and illusory-like sentient beings, as vast as the expanse of space. Another qualifier, as vast as the expanse of space, which is, in other words, limitless. Space has no limits, and therefore beings have no limits. But these beings, they are dreamlike and illusory-like. Okay? Must be liberated from the ocean of suffering, of samsara. Samsara is not a place. Samsara is a mode of existence. And what mode is this? This is a confused mode. In other words, beings, all these beings should be freed from this confused mode of existence that just goes on and on and on. Samsara literally means the circle, in the negative sense. It just keeps going on and on and on and on and on. So he says, not the awakening of the hearers of the lesser vehicle or the awakening of the solitary realizers, but they must be established in unsurpassed awakening. These other two are other motivations that one could have for one's spiritual practice. And these two other ones, basically in contrast to the one he recommends, these two other motivations has solving your own problems as the only reason for doing what you're doing. It's not selfish, as we would say it, per se, but it is self-focused. Yeah? And he's saying, that self-focused attitude is not going to cut it. Right? You need to have this big motivation, this big vision. that I'm going to do this for the sake of liberating these infinite beings from a confused mode of existence, therefore from the sufferings that arise, that result from that kind of being. Therefore, I myself should attain the state of perfect and complete Buddha. So this is also an important point. He's saying, now if you want to free others from confused existence, you first need to do your dishes. Like, manage your own household. Clean up your house before you try cleaning up other people's houses. Therefore, I myself should attain the state of perfect and complete Buddha. And for that purpose, I will engage in the stages of Dharma practice. And so this is said to be what bodhicitta is. This special intention. So within this involves compassion, the aspect of compassion, and the aspect of wisdom. So bodhicitta is not just compassion. I don't know how many times I have repeated this, but nonetheless, I still have people that have repeated this many times. You're like caught off guard when they hear me say, bodhicitta is not just compassion. And they're like, wait, what? Really? Yeah, it's not. But because of how books are, popular books on Buddhism, and also in an effort by these teachers to make it more relatable to people, often bodhicitta is like a fancy term for compassion. But compassion itself, it doesn't solve problems, or at least the problems that we are trying to solve. In fact, partial compassion, which is how most of us practice compassion, right? Partial compassion rather than impartial compassion. Partial compassion, partial love are the causes of war and oppression. Right? Nobody quite goes out killing for no reason. And the reason is, I'm protecting my loved ones. Partial love. Or even, I need to get rid of this group of people in order to protect a larger group of people. Compassion. Yeesh. Remember? Second World War? Groups of people saying, we need to get rid of this group of people so that the world will be a better place. I mean, we could argue whether they really mean it or not. Sure. But we should also recognize it's a form of partial compassion, partial love. When love and compassion is not guided by wisdom, it can create a lot of pain in this world. So here wisdom is a specific kind of wisdom, not wisdom in the general sense of the word. The wisdom of understanding where suffering comes from, where happiness comes from. What is short-term happiness is long-lasting happiness. So first, to be able to distinguish where happiness comes from, where suffering comes from. Next, to be able to see that there are happinesses that are producing their results, right, only for the short term, and there are happinesses that bring lasting effect. And the lasting effect is what we call freedom from confusion, state of Buddha. Short-term happiness, if it is truly happiness, is still based on the same principles of long-term happiness. But their effects are short-term. Because the wisdom that is involved there is not complete enough. There is some wisdom, but it's not going all the way. And so Gampopa says, we should aim for this kind. We should develop this kind of motivation. In particular, why, he says, not the awakening, right? Not the awakening, not the enlightenment as sought after by what he calls here hearers and solitary realizers of the lesser vehicle. Now, if some of you know enough of, Buddhist polemics, right, that you're talking about that kind of Buddhism. No. Here it's talking about attitudes. It's not talking about different denominations of Buddhism. Yes, there are existing Buddhist traditions that encourage their followers to become hearers, arhats. But that's not the problem he's critiquing here. What he's critiquing here is, so here, is an example of, right, the internal logic of specific systems. So forget about Buddhism and mystical Christianity. Even within Buddhist systems, if you don't understand that different Buddhist traditions have different internal logic when it comes to some, like specific points like this. Here, how this, like not the awakening of the hearers or the solitary realizers, but the awakening of the bodhisattvas, in other words. Why he highlights this? He's pointing to what I feel is a natural risk that Buddhist practitioners need to be more alert to and more careful about. Which is the nature of how the Buddha understood, right? What the problem is and what the solution is, can sometimes lead people to not caring about other people. You're like, what? How? You have, if you have that response, that means you have been reading maybe very lovey-dovey books about Buddhism. But because the Buddha says, right, happiness and suffering ultimately is an inside job. It's an inside job. And including bringing happiness to others, freeing others from suffering, there's a limit of what you can do for others. Because happiness and suffering is an inside job. You can and you should, if it is within your power, to remove the conditions of suffering from someone. But as long as they have the causes of suffering, then their causes of suffering are constantly looking for more conditions to ripen. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the way we understand, or the way the Buddha taught what the problem and the solution is, does kind of make us more likely to practice the Dharma in a very, well, I can only look out for myself. And because of that, this big intention has to be always centered. Because of how easily it can slip into a narcissistic spiritual pursuit. Because of the tremendous emphasis on you need to work with your own mind. You need to work with your own stuff. That kind of emphasis does come, right, with a risk of this becoming a narcissistic, navel gazing exercise. And so, right from the get-go, he says, develop this great motivation. Because this motivation is what's necessary. The middling one, he says, okay, if we were to state this in a more brief way, is this. For the sake of all dreamlike and illusory like sentient beings attaining of perfect awakening, I will do this and that. Yeah, this and that, meaning, all the things that I need to train in. The concise one is to think, for the sake of all dreamlike and illusory like sentient beings, I will engage in this Dharma practice. Meaning, so this extensive, middling, and brief is actually talking about different situations you find yourself in. And so the brief one is basically when you are in a specific activity that you're doing that is beneficial. Please remind yourself, don't do it only for your own sake. Do it for the sake of all. Now, footnote, that can also turn into a kind of narcissism. I'm doing it for others. I've seen that coming out myself. And because I'm doing it for others, right? Others, please get out of my way. That's like the, why are they fighting over religions? Because they're fighting over who is more peaceful. Right? This incredible ability to subvert everything, So I'm actually very uncomfortable when people say to me, they're being kind, they're being nice, they're like, oh, you're doing this for all beings. And I'm like, ugh. Ugh. Because really? I don't know. I kind of cringe, It's like, no, I'm not sure if I'm doing it for all beings. I mean, I know the party line. So we have to be careful with this in all so many ways, that we can kind of build up this unhealthy sense of self, puff it up. I'm doing this for all beings. And I can tell you, not joking, but I've seen how communities who use this language, like Buddhist communities that use this language, use it to unskillfully exploit people, sideline people. I'm not even saying that, there is a committee behind all of that going, hey, how do we exploit people? How do we silence dissent? But the elements at work kind of go in that direction. And everyone's sincerely thinking, we're benefiting so many beings. Well, unfortunately, some, right? Some harm along the way. Well, that's their karma. See? So it's not as straightforward as it sounds. But we have to start somewhere. Yeah, we have to start with appreciating this motivation, but then be on the lookout for how even something that is so noble, so altruistic, can be perverted. Not even because, right, there is a cabal of evil people. Just the way our confusions operate. Okay, so here, right, then he says, in general, whatever stages of accumulation of merit and purification of mental defilements one does, the preliminary practice, or the practice that comes first, is generating, arousing, dreamlike, illusory-like bodhicitta, whether in the extensive, middling, or concise forms as necessary. Then the main practice is experiencing all phenomena to be as a dream or illusion. Have you noticed that whether it's extensive, middling, or concise, this qualifier, dream-like, illusory-like beings, like, what's that? What's the deal with that? That's the wisdom side. The love and compassion element is one side. The wisdom side is another side. And sometimes we talk about perfecting wisdom and compassion. And often when we say perfecting wisdom and compassion, right, if you've read enough Buddhist things, you have attended enough Buddhist teachings, you always hear them saying, perfecting wisdom and compassion. And we tend to think what that means is, make it as much as possible, wisdom. Make it as much as possible, compassion. And that is the perfecting of wisdom and compassion. Yeah, maybe it is that. But I want to offer you something that I feel has more immediate relevance of what that means. Perfecting. Wisdom and compassion. It means these two aspects becoming more and more seamlessly woven together. Why? Because in practicing compassion, you can stray in the direction of creating more suffering for yourself and for others. So, what am I talking about? Well, compassion fatigue. Remember that expression? That's one way to stray. And so then, especially in those moments, we need to understand the illusory, dreamlike nature of these beings that we have tremendous love and compassion for. Now, on the wisdom side, if you are cultivating a clearer and clearer understanding of the illusory and dreamlike condition of beings and their suffering, again, if it can stray, right? It can stray in the direction of, it's ultimately all not real, so. You poor souls in Gaza, can you see it's not really real? Right? Now, most of us upstanding types will not say that out loud. So it's not even about the saying out loud, but it's the idea, like actually, yeah, it doesn't matter. No, cannot. So in some ways, right, wisdom and compassion at the beginning especially, they are almost like going in opposite directions. So the way to perfect wisdom and compassion is to bring them together more seamlessly. And there is no easy, linearly constructed sentences to express what that is. It's not logical. But you know it when you see it. Completely. Really genuine love and compassion, but fully understanding the illusory, dreamlike quality of all the happinesses and all the sufferings that are going on in the world. In terms of expressing this to a general public, it's actually very treacherous. So I would recommend to you, if you need to express this to others, err on the side of advocating kindness, understanding, love, and compassion. Keep your wisdom to yourself. I mean, all within reason. Yeah? Don't go around demonstrating the wisdom side and create misconceptions. And worse, your misconceptions not only, it's bad, it's not good if the misconceptions turn people away from the Dharma, but more dangerous is people think, oh, that is Dharma, and they follow it. But better to keep the wisdom more restrained about talking about those things. Because the consequences of that is, of the two, is I think more dangerous. This kind of spiritually informed disregard for other people's suffering. But it also doesn't mean, if you're not crying your heart out, you're not a good person. And certain parts of I'm assuming, but I should not, but some degree of assumption, most of us in this room sign on to this view of, whatever is called the progressive, right? The lovey kind, all of that, right? But also, so we tend to consume and be exposed to all these messages about, if you're not crying your heart out, you are a heartless person with all the sufferings that's going on in the world right now. So they want you to cry. They want you to be miserable. How can you enjoy anything when there's so much suffering in the world? If you are not outraged, you are not seeing what's going on. I think they said Gandhi said that, But Gandhi is saying to people right in front of him and saying, okay, now we go boycott salt. Gandhi wasn't saying it so that you post something on Facebook of your outrage. And then, what's on Netflix? Yeah. Until I get outraged again. So the perfection of these two aspects of bodhicitta is not even about making them infinite, but making them more and more seamless. That their inherent tensions in the end become a living paradox. Yeah. Let it be a paradox, I am to love deeply illusory and dreamlike beings. Yes. How do I do that? I don't know. Well, I know. But it's not the answer you think it is. It's doing these other things. And working towards loving deeply, genuinely, caring deeply and genuinely for illusory, dream-like beings. But I want the beings to be real! I want their suffering to be real so that I can give them real happiness instead of real suffering. We may not phrase it like that, but we do behave like that. And when we act based on that understanding of suffering and happiness, the more you try to fix, the worse it's going to get. Yeah. So this phrase, this expression permeates this whole teaching. Dream, then it says, then the subsequent practice. So remember, it says the preliminary is to give rise to this motivation. Then the main practice is experiencing all phenomena to be as a dream or illusion. The subsequent practice is to dedicate the dreamlike and illusory-like virtues, merit, to the benefit of all beings. It's sandwiched by love and compassion with wisdom in the middle. You see how? Yeah, it's bringing these two together. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this because I cannot stand seeing others suffer. I cannot stand that beings are not experiencing genuine, stable happiness. So that's why I'm doing this. What is the this that I'm doing? To train to see that this is all dream-like, illusory-like. Eh? Yes. It's fine if you go, eh? That means you're awake. That means you heard it right. Then you train that. How do you know that training in seeing all experiences as dream-like and illusory-like? You become more willing and concerned to benefit beings. The end. Oh, you Buddhists. On a good day, others find us interesting to talk to. On a bad day, it's extremely frustrating to talk to these Buddhists. And sometimes you are the one saying this to yourself. On a bad day, this is so frustrating. Doesn't make any sense. On a good day, ooh, I'm so sophisticated. It's okay. That's part of our condition, but we can change. So try to become less and less frequently either of those, good day and bad day. Even out. Even out, not in the sense of the equivalent of taking medication to numb your strong emotions, but to see and fully understand the nature of emotions, of feelings, of opinions, of thoughts. Seeing the nature won't immediately take away the pain. It won't. But you're introducing some insight into that experience. So you don't do yourself any favors if you think, oh, just seeing its nature, I become free. No. The Zen tradition is filled with stories that illustrate what I'm talking about, but they don't explain to you what the heck it means. You see? So you're just like, what? Right? Now, of course, if you're in a room full of Zen practitioners, you're not going to go, what? I don't want to look stupid.
call my
It-
studies.
yeah, it needs to be a very subtle nod, okay? Two big nods, you know, you're off. Right? You have to just. But that's their internal logic. They tell these stories that you say is paradoxical, but actually they're talking about this. And this is also how the relative and the absolute comes together as non-dual. But the Tibetan tradition has more patience with words. And so that's the style we're conducting it here. And maybe too many words. You know, because then it becomes fodder for our blah blah blah. Our false gods, our false Buddhas. And we think, oh, I understand. Now more words, okay? Then, like a dream or illusion, the one who dedicates, that means the one who dedicates this virtue, this merit. Sentient beings who are the object of dedication, those that you're dedicating this to. And all the roots of virtue that you're dedicating, they are no different from your own mind, and should be known as the miraculous manifestation of mind itself. There is a last minute turn to what we might call, wow, so inspiring. Yes, right? See that they are the magical display of your mind. A beautiful scene conjured up by the mind. Now because, right, the act of dedicating merit, which means, you know, giving away everything that you worked so hard for, if someone needs it. That's what dedication of merit, the implication of that. Everything that you have worked so hard for, foolishly, perhaps, willingly, you give away. Now this is a beautiful thing. Yeah, this is a beautiful thing. But here, Gampopa says, understand that this beauty arises from your mind. It's the miraculous display of your mind. Now do you understand how much good you can bring into this world when you know what your mind is? Next, here's another teaching called listening to the Dharma with perfect intention and application. So here are all the little pithy instructions that directly can be applied to how we practice the Dharma, how we are going to safeguard our heart, which I think is the title of today's talk. Whatever the title, I always just talk about the same things. You know, these guys from Urban Dharma. Yeah, he said that before. All the titles are just excuses. It's like, what will bring some people to wake up on a Saturday morning when it's better to stay in bed or read the New York Times? Anyway, in general, for listening to the Dharma, there are 2 points: perfect intention and perfect application. And so he's saying, you know, there are 2 aspects to how you learn the Dharma. See, you can be reading Dharma books and not, you know, uh-oh, the spy is awake. SIRI is spying. Oh, good. It's not connected to the internet. Okay, it cannot report to its bosses. Good. Yeah, they are spying for sure. Luckily, I'm quite fine with them spying. Like, you go ahead and know whatever you want to know. There are 2 points. I mean, we could be studying Dharma because we are curious, because of academic interest, intellectual interest. Yeah, that's fine, It's not saying you can't do that. But if you want, if your reason for knowing these spiritual instructions is to, bring about the result that these instructions are meant to deliver, then you have to listen to them in the following way, is what Kampupa is saying. And as for that, there is, again, the motivation. Check your motivation. Why are you listening? Because we forget. Even I forget. Even in Jing, sometimes I veer off to some other motivation. If I forget the motivation, which is to help you free yourself, right, from the mental defilements and the suffering that arise from the presence of mental defilements, I can often, I can tell you that, I catch myself straying into, I want to talk about some intellectual point, I want to talk about some abstract that I got excited about reading yesterday, in the news, la 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 la. Then I'm getting better and better at coming back without you noticing that. So I'm showing, the tricks that I have in my bag. But nonetheless, the motivation strays. Likewise, okay, when you're listening, you may have come here with the quote-unquote right motivation, but it's always shifting and changing, So anyway, here. Perfect intention has 4 aspects. Yeah, this is the way that the Tibetan tradition is very different from Zen. Lists. We love lists. And if you go full listing, 4 is just the beginning. Because in the first point of the 4, there are 7. And each of the 7 has 3 parts. Yes. And by the time you get to the list, you're like, where am I in this forest? Thankfully here there's only 4. No more, and point 1 has 3 more. Perfect intention has 4 aspects. Not for the sake of wanting fame for oneself, but with the intention of liberating others from the great ocean of suffering. So people teaching Dharma should remember this. And people learning Dharma should remember this. How so? Because among certain circles that we run around, knowing these things elevates your status. Or even, maybe in Johnson City, just driving around, you feel better about yourself. Certain bumper stickers you see, certain flags you see, you're like, it should not be like this. This is the fame, right? Not for the sake of wanting fame for oneself, but with the intention of liberating others from the ocean of suffering. Back to bodhicitta. Next, not for the sake of gaining wealth and honor for oneself, but with the intention of gaining all-knowing wisdom for others. Yeah, so not for the sake of being honored because I know, like they say, knowledge is power, right? And with this power comes wealth and honor. Not for that. Yes, you want to gain. But what is it that you want to gain? In contrast to wealth and honor? So maybe not so much this society. Knowledge of Dharma don't give you wealth and honor. But in Gampopa's world, it does. Especially that time. The whole of the Tibetan nation is invested in the promotion and the growth of Buddhist teachings. So whoever is learned in that area gets prestige, gets support, gets resources donated to them. So that's part of the context here. But it's still relevant to us. What is it that we're trying to gain in listening to the Dharma? All-knowing wisdom. All-knowing wisdom might sound like an attribute of God. God is all-knowing, Then we substitute, sometimes with God, with Santa Claus. He knows what you have done. Charcoal for you this year. And one doll. But here, all-knowing is talking about knowing cause and effect. When you know karmic causality, at least the principle of karmic causality, then poetically you can say you are all-knowing now. Because everything happens according to this principle. You cannot plant a mango seed and expect peach to blossom. You may want as much as you want and pray to whatever God you pray to. It's just not going to happen like that. Karmic causality is what all-knowingness essentially means. The more you can see karmic cause and effect working, the more you will see everything clearly. It's not about past lives, it's not about future lives, although it has implications. Then it's not even about last month and next month, although it has those implications. Karma is, so when you say living more in the present, I would agree if we factor this in. Presently aware of how whatever it is that I am with presently, it's also based on karmic causality. That how our mind, right, responds to whatever it is that has turned up is the working out of this cause and effect. If you encourage a certain type of causes, then a certain pattern of effects manifest. But instead, when good things happen, you're like, yep. When bad things happen, me, what did I do? Hello? You really want that answer? What did I do? Well, not for the sake of winning arguments. Learning Dharma, not for the sake of winning arguments for oneself, but with the intention of conquering the enemy of mental defilements for others. All of this end with for others, for others. But here, for others doesn't mean, like you literally go, conquer someone's mental defilements. Let me teach you how not to be selfish. No, we're not talking about that. This is based on the understanding, the point that you cannot really help someone with their selfishness if you have that within yourself. This is actually very different from the idea of oh, I will be a good therapist because, or I'll be a good addiction counselor because I'm addicted myself. Which may work in that context to some degree, but don't extend that. In the case of Dharma, it says no. You cannot say, oh, I have so many mental defilements, so I can tell you all about mental defilements. I mean, you see this. People, because of the personality cult that is promoted by social media, and then because of certain teachings in Buddhism, especially Tibetan Buddhism, about how you are to view the teacher as perfect and stuff like that. And then when clearly someone is not behaving the way they should, right? You have followers going, oh, he's just showing me. Yeah, you could take that as your take-home lesson, but for your sake, stay away from this person. Because if you come within their range of them taking advantage of you, probably that's what's going to happen. And you think, oh, I'm practicing Dharma. No, it's not. So here, instead of winning arguments for oneself, but with the intention of conquering. So winning arguments is like you win. So what is it that you're trying to win here? To gain the upper hand when it comes to mental defilements, afflictive emotions, emotions that bring pain, emotions that cause harm to yourself, to others. And not for the sake of finding fault with the Dharma teacher. Yay! Thank you, Gampopa. But for the intention of respecting the Dharma teacher and the Dharma for others. You don't respect the Dharma teacher or even the Dharma for the sake of Dharma or Dharma teacher, but for others. What it's saying here is, yeah, of course, we're not saying you go to listen to a Dharma teacher and, oh, I respect, everything they say must be true. No, we're not advocating that. It's just saying, if your goal there is to go find fault, well, no, that's wrong. No, that's wrong. Yeah, that's also wrong. There are better things to do. Go for a hike. Yeah, there are people like that. And we are those people. Like I said, both teachers and students, these faults equally apply. And it's not like a one-time deal, oh, I'm free from these faults. No. They are the tendencies that we lapse into. Yeah, so if you apply this, to the one teaching rather than the one listening, although this is the main point for the ones listening to the Dharma, right? That's what this instruction, but it also applies to the one teaching. If the one teaching is more interested in kind of displaying their greatness to get respect and admiration, then that's the wrong reason. Perfect application has 3 parts. 4 and 3. 3 parts is usually pretty easy because 3 parts is always before, main part, at the end. So first, during preparation, arouse bodhicitta while knowing that everything is like a dream and illusion. He comes back to that theme. Give rise to the great motivation, but understand that who you're trying to help, and that includes yourself, They have dream-like illusory. Illusory here is referring to the illusion of magicians, actually. Magicians conjure up an experience for us. Yeah, that's the illusory it's referring to. So dream-like quality magician's illusory quality. Yeah. So, while knowing that everything is like a dream, like a magician's illusion. In the main part, listening to any teaching with the meaning of the sixth perfection complete. So here you need to go learn about these six perfections. A very good book is Shantideva's Way of the Bodhisattva. So the six perfections are taught there. It's the perfection of giving, generosity, the perfection of disciplined conduct, the perfection of patience, the perfection of joyful effort, perfection of concentration, the mind being stable. And in the case of Shantideva, it's the mind being stable in bodhicitta. And then finally, the perfection of understanding, of wisdom. So he says, and the main part of listening to, the main way to execute, so to say, right? Because this is about how you learn or listen to the Dharma. So what this means here is, as for application, when you're listening to the Dharma, you cannot listen to anything in a vacuum. Hear it in the context of understanding the bigger picture. And the bigger picture in terms of the path to awakening is cultivating the six paramitas, the six perfections. Then, then it's the perfect execution of listening to Dharma. Not perfect execution of carrying out Dharma. That's not what's going on, the focus here. Here is how, first you have to have the perfect intention, motivation. Then as you're listening, you should be informed by this. What is the bigger picture? The bigger picture of the path is the six perfections of bodhisattvas. And afterwards, guess what? Dedicate all the roots of virtue to the attainment of perfect awakening for the sake of all beings. Back to that paradox, The meaning of that all condensed for the purpose of practice. So he says, okay, all of that, if we condense it, and for the purpose of someone who wants to practice this rather than someone who wants to teach this, debate this, defend this, or find fault with this. But if you want to summarize all of that for the purpose of you being able to carry it out, is this. For the sake of all sentient beings, illusory and dreamlike, but yet limitless as space, I should attain perfect Buddhahood. And for that purpose, for that reason, I should listen to the precious instructions, understand them, realize them, and practice them. Here the difference between understanding and realizing is, understanding is somewhat still intellectual, right? Because to understand something, you first have to intellectually grasp, right, the ideas being taught. Then, in this case, to realize them means, now you take that understanding and put it alongside your experiences, your life experiences. Either alongside, that's one way of putting it, or let those teachings be your glasses and look at all the things around you and say, am I seeing things clearer now? Yeah. Maybe not. And if it's not, then Go back to the optometrist. Need some adjustments. Yeah. That's the realize. And then, now that you see more clearly, then it says practice. So practice now means, and henceforth, right, with regards to this kind of scenario, this kind of situation, this kind of exchange, this kind of interaction, I should do it in this way. And this way or that way comes from the realizations. So now put that into practice. One must generate such a special intention. You have to do it this way. When you're learning the Dharma, listening Dharma. So this is also applicable if you're just reading Dharma books. These intentions. Questions? Comments? Yes, please.
Actually, I think I mentioned I was listening to a talk of yours earlier today.
Uh-huh, okay.
I heard your voice in my head. And it was, you were talking to the Ecumenical Buddhist Society of Arkansas.
Oh yeah, uh-huh, sure.
Nice group of people. But you brought up a point, and it kind of twisted in it made my brain kind of have a spasm. And you talked about, and it's totally related to this too, you talked about how as we practice, aspire to be enlightened and a Buddha, you said something like, we shouldn't have that expectation for other people. Is that like,
Keep going.
and because and it goes back to how you mentioned we work on ourselves for our liberation. But when I realized that I was guilty of doing that. It's like, I know what works. Why doesn't everybody else do this? And I think, it's comical, but, it's so relevant, especially now. It's like if everybody just, come on, And I just wanted to bring that up because I surely can't be the only person.
Oh yeah, no, I mean,
Yeah, but
the world will be a much better place if they all listen to me.
Exactly.
We all have various versions of that walking around, inhabiting our heads. So there you go.
And part of my practice is, it's like when I experience a person that I consider difficult, or just everybody.
Everybody is difficult?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Yeah, that's
like,
clear. I didn't think that was what you mean.
Consider them, it's like you have a Buddha nature. You have some kind of essence. This is, you're clouded over, I'm clouded over, hopefully maybe we'll get somewhere or nowhere. But
Yes.
but I
Right?
just thought that was
Namaste, y'all. The divine in me salutes the divine in you.
Right.
Which is a fake translation, but it's good.
What's it mean for real? Sorry.
It's an act of respect.
Yeah.
And then in the Indian context, it's hierarchical. It's not at all flat. No. Certain people namaste certain people. Certain people do not namaste certain people.
Oh.
Oh, yeah. In the Indian context. And now it doesn't mean that it has to continue like that, I'm just saying there's a whole context of caste and all of that. So the boss would never say to the employee, namaste. The employee would be like, wait, what's going on?
Wow.
Yeah, because it's not, Anyway,
Raffle up the
but we can change the meaning here. We're not in India. We're in Johnson City, so the divine in me salutes the divine in you.
Yeah.
The Buddha nature in me, y'all. Namaste, y'all.
It's just that, you know, the,
Yeah,
just
of
that
course.
distance.
And then when we do that, right, that is when we then, right, the Dharma comes in. See? See how even something so noble becomes an attempt to build self in an unskillful way. Right? So we're building unskillful sense of self out of these opinions. And we see it once, we see it twice, we see it 3 times. The more we see, the more we will kind of want to wean ourselves off that habit. And it can happen. It cannot happen if we look away. Pretend it's not. And that's about the skillful attention. And skillful attention is not obsession. So here's another caution. All you recovering Catholics, Jews, and Southern Baptists, watch out for guilt. Guilt that leads to self-hate, whether either strongly or subtle ways. Self-hate and not comfortable in your own skin. You have to allow yourself, find ways to be comfortable in your own skin. Even if you also know, but that is not the ideal of Buddhahood. Yes, but you have to start with comfortable in your own skin in all the messiness, stinkiness, beauty, ugly of whatever that skin is right now. You have to make more effort there. I don't really need to say this when I'm in Asia teaching, because they don't have that so strongly. But then more and more of Asia is educated in the Western way, so they may not have Southern Baptist preachers, but it's kind of in the vibe. And more with these educated, sophisticated urbanites in Asia, I also have to repeat this. Yeah. Yes.
You know, you spoke about ultimate bodhicitta, the dream-like, the illusory. When I first encountered this, it was difficult to grasp, and then, but there were 2 things that just, you know, when we dream, we have vivid dreams, it's real, right? But it's not. And then I had an accident, a really serious accident about a year ago, where I was unconscious. They pulled me out, and I remember just being in that place where it was illusory. It was, and it wasn't a bad thing at all. It was a place of gratitude, really. But you know, I'm just, I don't know what I'm asking here, but the idea of relative and bodhicitta, the one thing that you said very quickly that really struck me was something like, the relative and the absolute come together to make the non-dual. And that's just the whole of it? Is that what you meant by that?
Yes. That we will continue to be challenged by how these 2 are non-dual. And we'll continue to be challenged by that. But don't give up on either. So this is where the faith comes in. Actually, we don't have time, but there's a whole instruction on the importance of faith. This is the kind of faith that we need to have. All spiritual traditions require faith. But where they differ is faith in what? Here, I would say, this is the faith that we need to have. A faith that, in fact, yes, in the perfected state, is the non-duality of the relative and ultimate that is realized, is the non-duality of wisdom and compassion that is perfected.
Is that
then
kind of like a faith in the process will get you to that?
Yeah.
And that's the
and
the
also a
process?
faith in
Yeah,
that this result is possible.
right.
And as for that, nobody can give that to you. Nobody can teach you that, unfortunately. It's something magical, whether that faith is there or not. But you can remove, although I would say you cannot, no one can tell you how to let that faith appear in your life. You can remove the obstacles that you put up to prevent that from arising. So keep in check your cynicism. Keep in check. Huh? Keep in check. I know it's hard, but keep in check. Just don't go all the way with it. Keep in check. Your tendency to be pessimistic about things. Keep in check. I know it's hard, but therefore keep in check. It doesn't mean like it's hard, I'm just going to go all the way, right? It's like saying, I'm walking down a gradient of this that is very steep, it's really hard. What do you do in those cases? It's really hard, I'm just going to give up. No, we don't do that. We just have to restrain, Not all restraints are bad. Keep it in check. Yeah. Then, the less obstacles we build around allowing that kind of faith to arise, the more likely that faith arises. This is the faith that we need to have. And I said we need to have. It doesn't mean, you can order it on demand. Also, don't pretend. Don't pretend. Have faith. That faith can arise. One section, I know we have passed the time that we've allocated for this gathering, but let me quickly, there's one section of this collection. It's called the two armors. Here it's part of a bigger teaching that says, in order to practice what is called Mahamudra, in order to practice Mahamudra, Gampopa says, you need these two armors, meaning like armor. And who puts on armors? Warriors. Yeah. Even though this is not teased out completely, it's like, well, that's what's implied. So you're going to war. War with what? Well, with your mental defilements, with your afflictive emotions, right? So here, in other words, these are supporting trainings for this spiritual war, so to say, right? These two armors. So he says, you need these two armors, and what are the two? Not engaging in any unskillful actions, even for the sake of one's life, and not interrupting the continuous engagement in skillful, virtuous actions, is the first armor. And he calls that the outer armor. And there's the outer armor and there's the inner armor. So the first one speaks to the necessity, the appreciation of the outer conduct, which is pay attention to how suffering is created and how happiness is created. That they're all brought about by our actions. So don't look away from that. So this is, in other words, we need to have a clear kind of ethical context for what we're practicing. you cannot disregard the importance of this ethical framework. And the essence of the Buddhist ethical framework is do no harm. There is Buddha's level of doing no harm, and there is the beginner's level of doing no harm. Keep the Buddha's level of doing no harm as like your reference point, and we just sincerely do the best we can. You're not going to be able to do it perfectly. And when you're not doing it perfectly, right, also don't make excuses for it, on the one hand. And on the other hand, don't beat yourself over it. Actually, Gampopa also talks about this. It's like, don't be so hard on yourself. I was surprised to see that, because usually in all the Tibetan things, it's like, shape up, shape up, shape up, shape up. This one, maybe he anticipated Southern Baptists. Don't be so hard on yourself, he says. And it's like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So that's the outer armor. Inner armor of wisdom. The outer armor of conduct, ethical framework. The inner armor of understanding. And he says, and as for this, there are two aspects. One, do not shun physical illness of your body. Do not shun. Do not, do not treat, physical illness as an enemy. Two, do not shun. The technical word is abandon, but really it's like do not shun, be afraid of. By conceptualization, blah, 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 of the mind. Sickness of the body, blah, blah, blah of the mind. He says, don't shun either of them. I say, wow. Because I can guarantee you, whatever the immediate reasons of you turning up here today, what's really behind all of this is either one of those two reasons or both of those reasons. I'm tired of the blah, 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 and I'm tired of physical sickness, and whatever combination of that I'm tired of, therefore I am here. But now, the teaching here is don't shun physical illness and mental troubles. The outer physical illness and the inner mental, emotional stress. Okay, now, just very briefly. He says, how do you work with physical illness? It just kind of seems like, really? At least for me, really? But again, he doesn't engage in fancy talk. We say that these early Kagyu masters, they gave instructions like old grandmothers. Nothing fancy, direct, heartfelt, simple words. Yeah, they're not out to impress. So he says, 3 ways you can subdue the illness. And subdue here also means you can overpower illness. So what is he talking about? It's really interesting. He says, this is what we mean by overpowering illness. Although previously you did not think of as this illness, right, as being small. Now imagine how much worse it could be. And in that way, you can subdue. Not literally the illness itself, right? I mean, you don't like become cancer free by practicing this. He's talking about our reaction to it. Our reaction to illness. See, when you have the toothache, when you have a toothache, really, I don't know about you, I will be the first to confess, I walk around thinking, this is the worst kind of pain. Really? No, not really. Because when I'm free of the toothache, 2 months later, I get a paper cut, I go, this is the worst kind of cut. Yeah, says the one who has not been slashed by a machete. But we do. When a particular illness has turned up, we think that is the worst that can ever happen to anyone in all of human history, and now it's happening to me. So he says, you overpower that. You subdue that by saying, you know, this could be a lot worse, and it's not. Oh, yeah, that's true. It might sound kind of, I don't know, pedestrian, but try it. Because our tendency is to exaggerate in the other direction. And if it sounds like this is an exaggeration in how simple it can be, it's only to show how we exaggerate in the other direction and never even consider how much exaggeration is in that other direction. That whatever pain I'm having now is the worst kind of pain that someone can have. Subdue. 2, severing root of illnesses. Oh, what is that? It's done by reflecting on, and so this requires some ability to train the mind. This requires some stability of mind. So how do you do this? He says, by reflecting on where illnesses first came from, where they remain, meanwhile, and where they finally go. By realizing that there's no place where they actually came from, and no place, even in the present, that they are actually staying at, and no place that they go to in the end, conceptualizations and conceptualizations subside. Again, you know, this is not Gampopa's solution to whatever ailments you have. Please continue to consult your doctors, whether TCM, whether at the university hospital. Yeah, we are not Christian Scientists. Yeah, go to doctor. It's talking about the mental stress that arises, that is separate from the illness, and he's teaching us how to work with that mental stress. And so here he's saying, where did this illness come from? It's not so much, you know, okay, now I'm going to research, you know, where diabetes comes from. He's saying, this burden that you have now, this concept, this worry, where does it come from? See the interdependent nature. Now this is actually seeing how ephemeral. Because if it is always there, then at all times 24 hours a day you should feel the same, but no, you don't. Right? Whatever physical illness you have, you do not feel the same towards it for 24 hours a day. But it feels like that, right? and we let that take over. Rather than, oh no, it's just, throughout the day, about 6 times a day, I feel this. Well, 6 times a day equals to how many minutes or hours? Well, for some people, it's 18 hours. But more often, it's about 18 minutes. But then we let the 18 minutes, right? Objectively 18 minutes of feeling the dread, of feeling the pain, and feeling the suffering of the physical illness. We let that 18 minutes of experience bleed into the 24 hours minus 18. And so he says, you can get to the root of this and cut it off, which is the conceptualizations. The letting it kind of bleed into everything. And so that a paper cut is not just, the pain is not just on the finger. It pervades the whole body. How in the world? Finally, the third method is called carrying illness onto the path. Here it's called accepting the situation that you are in. And it says, carrying illnesses onto the path is knowing that all happiness and suffering exist in a manner of these two being interdependent. That when we like happiness, that when we like pleasure, we have signed up for disliking suffering. Once we make a choice, the other comes with it. It's like a thing and its shadow. There's no escape now. Just understanding that point can make both the experience of happiness and suffering to be less of a big deal, less of a burden. And next step, the one who experiences illnesses, truly what experiences illnesses is mind. And the one who holds on to being ill is also mind. And then, how stable is mind? Not that stable. Quite fragile. Here is when not stable and not fragile is good news. And not me is good news. Sickness is not me. Illness is not me. It feels like me, but actually it's not. And finally, seeing this, understanding this, you should develop the big motivation now. I will use this illness to achieve something beneficial. Instead of becoming. Let it kind of have the upper hand. And so this is the not shunning the experience of physical illness. So this is the cliffhanger, right? Because the next one, the armor, we don't have time for that. The inner armor about all the blah, blah, blah. Already he has already introduced. But the next one is more subtle. That one actually, maybe no point to even talk about it yet until, of course we're not going to screen people like this, until really the prerequisite is you have actually done some looking into how your mind, how emotions, how thoughts, how do they operate, how do they behave, what are some of, because otherwise it's all just, again, concepts. Because the next one is he talks about conceptualizations, meaning, the flow of thoughts and emotions that go on endlessly. So here is talking about a different way to work with that than even the normal way that people who meditate thinks you should work with that. There he says, see that this endless flow is your best friend, your most kind benefactor. It's like, what? Really? Yes. But if you apply that prematurely, meaning you have no idea at all how the mind works, how heavy these things can be, and how light it can also be, if you have no idea about that and you read that, you may go home with the wrong take-home lesson. Like, oh yeah, it's just fine. Then you pretend walking around like, oh, it's fine. But it's eating away. So anyway, just know that after talking about the armor, the outer armor of wisdom has to do with how you regard physical difficulties, physical illness. And then the inner armor of wisdom has to do with how you work with, how you relate with the mental, emotional stress. And more subtle than stress, really. That one, mostly you already trained that with how you relate to illness and difficulties. Here is really talking about more meditative states, like in the context of formal meditation, watching how the mind goes on and on and on and on. Yeah, how to deal with that. So, all of this is for the purpose of safeguarding the heart. There's a lot out there that has a different understanding. We need to impute like malevolence, We don't even need to impute malevolence to the people who are doing things that we think is harmful, destructive. We just need to understand that the Buddha sees things differently. And in a way if we apply these teachings, in a way we are swimming against the stream. It's against the stream. So there is some degree of the stress of streaming against the stream. But if the stream is leading to, a wood chipper machine, you better swim against the stream. Then the swimming against the stream, whatever stress it is, you're like, no, it's worth it. It's like the subduing the illness, So, but it gets easier. It does. Initially, it just seems like, I'm swimming against the stream. But you get to parts of the stream where then it's, again, calm waters, then you rest, and again, you've got to go further up. But then you're also training the muscles, the ability. In this case, you don't get up there, lay eggs, and die, okay? In this case, you get up there, you become free, and then you help others. You go along the banks, Come on, don't give up, don't give up.
I was thinking of the salmon.
Thank you.
So we are just a mountain apart. If you want to be in 3D again, Urban Dharma is on the other side. Certainly, when I have time, I can come back here. Otherwise, there is Zoom, which is a lot of our participants connecting to us on Zoom. Yeah. That's it for today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
So, as it says, at the end, dedicate.
Yeah.
So we don't need to, there are, things to chant, things to recite, but just, carry this with you and say, all the preciousness that I have accumulated, I will give away. If it helps someone else, I will give away. But don't give away, like only the things that you don't need and don't want. So you need to recognize what the merit, and say, I give away. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.